Visiting my grandparents' remote village nestled deep in the Bangladeshi countryside as a child enthralled me. I spent endless days immersed in verdant rice paddies and exploring the shadowy forests. But one summer night when I was 11, I experienced something so chilling in those woods that it haunts me to this day. An encounter my grandmother solemnly warned was with an evil jinn. It began late one night as I slept deeply on a thin straw mat at my grandparents' modest hut. I was suddenly jolted awake by a distant but piercing shriek of agony somewhere outside in the impenetrable darkness. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs, unsure if I had imagined it. But then another anguished and inhuman wail cut through the stillness, like the cry of someone being subjected to unspeakable torment. Every hair on my body stood at attention. I anxiously crept to the window, peering out into the moon-bathed night. Our family's remote hut sat nestled at the edge of the dense forest, nothing but gnarled trees and wispy fields as far as the eye could see. As I nervously scanned the area, I saw it, a pale, wavering figure hovering at the tree line. It appeared to be a young girl dressed in a tattered white gown, her face obscured by long, stringy dark hair hanging limply. She was standing there staring right at me through the window, her body contorted and twitching in horrifyingly unnatural ways no human could mimic. I stood paralyzed for a moment as our eyes locked in an unspoken shout-out, her hollow gaze boring into the very depths of my soul. She released another bone-chilling shriek and slowly began gliding toward the hut, her feet never seeming to touch the ground. My blood instantly turned to ice in my veins. This was no ordinary village girl who had gotten lost. This was something far more sinister and supernatural. Some ancient evil wearing the innocuous guise of youth to ensnare prey. I unfroze and stumbled back into the safety of bed, burrowing deep under the covers. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed for the warm dawn light to arrive, too terrified to move a muscle the entire night. At some point, pure exhaustion overtook me, and I uneasily drifted off. When I tentatively emerged the next morning, I was still badly shaken by the chilling events. I told my grandmother what I had witnessed, expecting her to comfort me and assure me it was just a bad dream. But instead, her expression turned uncharacteristically grim. In hushed, somber tones, she told me I had encountered a jinn, a malevolent creature from Arabic and Islamic folklore capable of possessing both humans and locations. I recounted every detail, the shrieking, the white burial dress, the unearthly gliding movements instead of footsteps. My grandmother listened intently to each piece, her face lined with grave concern. She then confirmed definitively that it matched all the signs of a jinn, said to roam the night stalking dense forests and abandoned places seeking innocent souls like mine to terrorize. I shuddered as she told me I was fortunate it had not come any closer to the hut, as jinn were known to drive people mad or even kill them through sheer fright alone. I could barely fathom this demonic entity singling me out, so grateful I had managed to escape back into the relative safety of home. But over the following nights, my sleep became plagued by vivid nightmares of burning red eyes peering in through the window as sharp claws scraped menacingly against the outside walls. I'd wake drenched in sweat, screaming until my grandmother reassured me nothing could penetrate our walls. Despite her consoling words, I begged my parents to let me sleep crowded in their bed instead of alone in the darkness. During the day, I refused to go anywhere by myself, irrationally convinced that stepping beyond the safety of our family would give the sinister jinn the chance it had been waiting for to lure me into its clutches. The creature's unseen presence lurked heavily at the edges of the forest, patiently watching and waiting. I could feel its ancient, ravenous energy focused on me, ready to pounce again given any opportunity. When we returned to the city, I was consumed with profound relief to leave the sight of that chilling, supernatural encounter far behind. As I grew older, I tried rationalizing it away as just a particularly vivid nightmare or stress-induced hallucination in response to finding myself in a strange new environment. But deep in my gut, the primordial sense of inexplicable dread from that screeching specter has never fully left me. I still get chills down to my very core if I think too long about those hollow, staring eyes boring into me from the darkness. This was no ordinary nightmare. This was a callous predator who had set its sights upon me, but failed to seize its prize. My rational mind wants to reject the possibility of cursed mythic beings stalking the night for victims. Yet every primal instinct inside me still screams to stay secured inside after sunset and keep ancient evil safely locked beyond the threshold where it manifests in its true grotesque form. I suppose I'll never fully know if my grandmother was right about supernatural entities existing just beyond the veil of reality. But when I recall that shrieking girl gliding silently toward me from the black woods, every nerve in my body still ignites with primeval fear. Whatever lurked out there is not something I ever wish to reckon with face to face again. As a curious yet oblivious 10-year-old, I jumped at the chance for adventure when my parents sent me to spend the summer visiting cousins in a quaint rural village tucked away in the Irish countryside. Those time-worn rolling hills and dark, mysterious forests seemed rife with secrets waiting to be uncovered by an intrepid explorer like myself. But one frightening experience inside a crumbling abandoned tower deep in those woods quickly taught me that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. On one of my first days roaming freely around the unfamiliar village environs, my cousins pointed out a creepy stone tower half hidden in the shadows of the forest. When I eagerly asked what the ominous building was, they lowered their voices and whispered that it had been locked up and left to decay decades ago because it was intensely haunted by restless, violent spirits. Of course, being a bold and adventurous child, this tantalizing bit of spooky local lore immediately piqued my curiosity. I couldn't stop obsessively thinking about that imposing abandoned tower looming between the trees and what ghostly secrets it might hold within its weathered confines. Were the chilling stories just exaggerated tall tales meant to deter nosy village kids like us from sneaking into play and getting hurt? Or could actual sinister paranormal dangers really lurk inside, lying in wait to prey upon innocent souls? After ruminating on it for days, my burning curiosity finally became too much to resist. One drizzly night, I recruited 2 cousins and a neighbor kid to come secretly explore the allegedly haunted tower with me. We waited until the adults were sufficiently preoccupied with their own activities, then stealthily snuck off as a group into the darkened, isolated woods. As we traversed deeper under the canopy of trees, an eerie thick fog slowly rolled in, further amplifying the unnerving horror movie-esque ambience. I could feel my temporary bravado already starting to waver with each snapping twig or rustling unseen animal in the brush. But I maintained a calm outward show of courage, refusing to expose any fear in front of the others. Finally, after what felt like an eternity stumbling blindly through the misty forest, the creepy stone tower emerged before us. Even in the low light, I could see decades of neglect. Cracked walls blanketed in ivy, moss-eaten archways, boards haphazardly nailed across rotting wooden doorways. Definitely seemed like someone had actively tried to deter any visitors or squatters long ago. Yet the clearly abandoned state also hinted no one had dared approach here in many years. We cautiously crept closer through the weeds and brambles, daring each other in hushed tones to touch the imposing walls or peek through cracks between the boarded-up entranceways. My cousin kept trying to unnerve me by whispering about ghosts peering back out from the darkness. I laughed along nervously each time, trying to ignore the prickling unease running down my spine. Just then, so faintly I thought I might have imagined it, an eerie whisper seemed to emanate from within the tower walls themselves. "Come in." The disembodied voice beckoned weakly, yet clearly. We all froze in our tracks, my heart nearly stopping dead in my chest. Had another group of kids found their way in before us? Or was this the actual menacing cry of a forsaken spirit? The heavy silence was abruptly shattered as the other children came unfrozen and immediately screamed in raw terror. They hastily made a break for the distant safety of the tree line without looking back. I quickly joined them, screaming and crying too purely on primal instinct as we all crashed chaotically through the dark woods. We didn't stop sprinting until we were a good distance back within the boundaries of the village. Shaking and sobbing, we breathlessly told our confused parents what had happened in the woods. The adults all exchanged knowing, concerned glances with each other, sternly reminding us kids that the tower was strictly off-limits, and essentially quarantined for very good reason. No more talk of ghost hunting. We were extremely fortunate to have come back in one piece at all. I overheard my aunt and uncle later speculating in hushed tones that it was likely just a homeless drifter passing through who had taken shelter inside. They assured my parents the boards on the door were still intact, so no actual spirits could be lingering. This rational explanation eased my mind only marginally. I still couldn't fully dismiss or rationalize away that pleading, unearthly voice that had seemed to issue from the very stones. Now, 20 years later, I still get chilling goosebumps up my spine whenever I allow my mind to wander back to that foolish tower outing. While we were probably just guilty of working ourselves into a fearful frenzy exploring somewhere we clearly shouldn't have been, I've come to realize some eerie rural mysteries are better left unexamined. Sometimes shrugging in uncertainty is the wisest path forward when confronted with the unexplained, staying cautiously wary from a distance rather than seeking to illuminate answers that could invite even greater darkness. That summer night's chilling expedition left me with a lasting respect for all that remains imperceptible, obscured, and unknown in our world. Whether legitimate paranormal forces or mere mundane human deceptions lurk just out of sight, I've learned I'm content letting them remain prudently undisturbed. The darkness undoubtedly hides much, but humanity's light has limitations in just how far it can or should delve to dispel the shadows fully. So now the allegedly haunted forest tower stands fixed in my memory, not just as an alluring historical landmark, but an enduring reminder of deeper lessons. Some doors are best left forever sealed and secured, some secrets safest eternally unshared. The darkness will always whisper and beckon for curious minds, but I've matured enough now to resist leaning recklessly close to listen. Visiting my father's remote ancestral village in Nigeria as a child was always an adventure. I loved spending long days playing soccer with my rambunctious cousins and eating my grandmother's rich peppery stews. But on my very first night staying in the family compound, I experienced something chilling that still gives me goosebumps, a sinister introduction to the darker supernatural forces lurking beneath the region's folklore. It began after an evening sitting around a fire listening to my older cousins spin terrifying tales of ghosts, demons, and witches. Their stories left me already feeling unsettled and jumpy before bed. As I finally drifted off in the small, pitch-black bedroom, I was startled awake a few hours later by a horrific nightmare. I awoke with my heart slamming violently in my chest, disoriented and gasping for breath in the stifling darkness. As my eyes gradually adjusted, I noticed a strange lump under my pillow that had not been there when I went to sleep. Apprehensive, I slowly reached beneath the pillowcase and pulled out a crude, makeshift leather pouch on a cord, bound together with rough stitching. Examining it closely, I realized the pouch contained small animal bones and an intricate hand-carved amulet etched with mysterious foreign symbols. This was definitely not mine. Reflexively, I knew in my gut this unexplained nocturnal offering meant grave danger. Terrified, I immediately woke my father, urgently showing him the unsettling hex talisman that had manifested under my head as I slept. His face turned starkly serious, illuminated eerily by the moonlight as he examined the objects. In hushed, somber tones, he told me this was juju, a form of West African black magic often used by witch doctors and elders to curse enemies and dish out retribution. The realization made my blood run cold. This hexed amulet had clearly been covertly planted under my pillow as I slept, but by whom? And why target an innocent child like me? As I sat rigid with building dread, my father's expression darkened. In a low voice, he muttered a single name, Babtund, his envious and unhinged stepbrother who lived nearby. He said Babtund had always secretly resented my dad for leaving their village, getting educated abroad, and making a prosperous life overseas. This curse seemed like the deranged man's twisted revenge plot. I huddled close to my dad, feeling exposed and violated by the idea of someone wishing harm on me, just out of their own pure jealousy and resentment. My father tried reassuring me that Babtund's magic was only powerful if you chose to believe in it, but still insisted on promptly disposing of the cursed objects outside to be safe. The remainder of our visit, I barely slept, constantly listening for any strange sounds or intruders lurking about the compound after midnight. I jumped nervously at every creak and rustle outside, convinced each was the stealthy footsteps of a warlock coming to inflict more terror. My father solemnly warned the rest of the family to be extra vigilant about watching out for his unbalanced stepbrother Baptundi skulking around, seeking opportunities to hurt more innocent victims. He knew Baptund would stop at nothing to avenge his perceived envy. In the light of day, when we did catch brief glimpses of Baptund around the village, his glare sent bone-chilling shivers down my spine. His eyes were cold, cloudy, and devoid of any empathy or light. They were the haunting eyes of a soul wholly consumed by darkness. I could instantly tell this was a man capable of inflicting profound evils without remorse if given the chance. On the night right before we were scheduled to return home, I had an even more horrifically vivid nightmare of being strangled by a amorphous, shadowy figure with immense strength. I woke up choking and gasping desperately for air, convinced I was still being smothered by this malignant presence. As my panic gradually subsided, I felt something brittle and delicate brush against my cheek in the darkness. I turned my head to find a dried, shriveled chicken's foot bound with more strange curses upon my pillow. Baptund had clearly slipped in under the cover of night to leave this vile calling card. My father was apoplectic the next morning, demanding the men of the family keep far better watch for this unhinged and dangerous brother haunting our compound. But I think deep down even he knew we could never truly be safe from Baptund's reach, as long as bitterness and resentment festered within his soul. Returning home, I begged my parents to cleanse our house of any evil curses that may have trailed us back from the village. For weeks I had debilitating nightmares of being stalked through the remote forests by a shadowy, faceless warlock. It felt as if the dark tendrils of Baptund's insidious magic had slipped beyond the village borders, still tethered to me even an ocean away. In time, the nightmares faded, but a deeper sense of fear toward the invisible dangers of the occult stayed with me. The protective bubble of childhood innocence had burst, exposing me prematurely to the grim understanding that some souls harbor profoundly dark energies and agendas. For better or worse, the ancient craft slumbering in my ancestral homeland had stirred something equally primal and vigilant within my own soul, a newfound wariness toward the unseen forces of evil lurking within men's hearts, no matter where I traveled. Perhaps Baptundi never truly placed a curse on me, merely my own conscience after crossing paths with such palpable malevolence. But when I picture his vacant, merciless eyes glaring out from the remote village shadows, some deeper part of me understands why such superstitious fear runs so deep in parts of the homeland. Some evils cannot be cleanly cast out by the light of progress or reason, but linger and haunt generations later from the past. Thanks for listening in. If you like what you hear, then please like and subscribe and support this new channel. Until next time.